doing this Easter egg content. If you watch the YouTube, you get this. This is when we like reveal one of our big life secrets or something, or we accidentally say something about somebody that we didn't want everybody to hear.
Oh, does that mean Julio Jones is on the show?
Yeah, right. Sal, do you realize we're on live TV right now?
Man,
Remind Sal that we're on live, the Audible, the
I
couch.
don't even want to work at Roto World. They don't ever win.
All right, let's go live. Why should you switch your league or join a league with Superflex lineups? That and more this week on the couch. Sal, Stefanile, no one better to ask this question. Why Superflex?
Well, I say why not Superflex? But if we said that, then the show would be over. I kind of need to crash on this couch for a little bit longer. I'd say, no, for me, it's just making the most important position in football no longer an afterthought as it has become in traditional start one only quarterback leagues. Although I do feel that's kind of altering a bit thanks to the implosion of all these mobile quarterbacks who have entered the league that have kind of added a little bit more value to the position because everyone wants to make sure they get one of those guys that can like add an extra like 5 to 7 points on the ground. But so having said that, I feel like in like a one quarterback league, I could probably list about 25 quarterbacks I'd feel okay with as my QB1. And then I would just like wait until the last part of the draft to take one and then stream it during the season. Now, we all know their late round quarterback strategy. It's something I've come to love over the years. But that luxury doesn't really exist in Superflex leagues, You actually have to put the time and the effort into researching the quarterback position, studying quarterback depth charts, deciphering coach speak, determine if and when a quarterback change might happen. I know passers like Jordan Love and Davis Mills will be drafted in Superflex redraft leagues. No one cares about them in one quarterback leagues, but over at 2QBs, we've begun running some redraft Superflex mocks for our site there, and there were 41 quarterbacks taken so far. So more quarterbacks equals more strategy, more chaos, which equals more fun. Like if you want to get nerdy with quarterbacks, like I say, that's the best reason to play Superflex. Just more of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, but the most important thing is, like us old timers can remember when PPR was a new thing. And it was a new thing because the first 2 rounds of every draft were like 20 running backs and 4 wide receivers and maybe Tony Gonzalez or something like that. And it just wasn't fun. It made draft position so much more important because, the difference between getting the first pick and the 8th pick was massive because it was just the first running back and the 8th running back. And I do hear from folks that is also something that bothers them in Superflex leagues. And I think that one of the things that maybe it's like I wouldn't say modified Superflex Al, but maybe make sure quarterback touchdowns are 4 or maybe even 3. A point per 25 pass yards. Maybe quarterbacks don't get quite the same rate of scoring for rushing yards. Whatever it is, wherever you put these little sliders, you want them to make it so that the decisions are hard, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
In the first round, we have to choose between Travis Kelce and Josh Allen and Devontae Adams and Alvin Kamara. That's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That you have to think about that. My favorite league is one where the positions, it's a full IDP league too, and the positions are all weighted so that every round, there is no angle you can play to maximize positional value. You just have to take players you believe in.
Right. That's where I think a good commish comes into play that can figure out those settings. I'll say I broke into the industry in 2013 as the 2QB guy. And like a lot of people just didn't care about 2 quarterback leagues, right? They didn't want to start an extra quarterback. They thought that format was weighted too heavily to quarterbacks. Over the years, Superflex has gained a lot more popularity. I like to credit Scott Fish and the Scott Fish Bowl for that. But people are realizing like, why not just add an extra quarterback slot that's optional? Okay, so you don't have to force yourself to start 2 quarterbacks. So bye 2 QB leagues, hello Superflex leagues. And what you mentioned about scoring settings and positional scarcity, positional value, that's something I have come to realize just how hardcore it is in Superflex Dynasty this offseason. I host this show for 4 for 4 called the 4-Minute Drill, and because this was like up to now was pretty much Dynasty season, so every episode was basically Dynasty centric. And I would always look at the Superflex startup ADP on Dynasty League football, And there's a rookie quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, going in the first round, which absolutely blew my mind because I come from a redraft background. That's my type of format that I love to play the most. So drafting a quarterback in the first round of a Superflex in startup just would never enter the brain, the atmosphere. Like I would never even think about that. But in Dynasty, okay, here's someone you think he's probably going to be a starter for like the next 15 years or so. Everyone's calling him a generational talent. He's landed in a pretty damn good spot in Jacksonville with all those offensive weapons around him. But I'm looking at this Superflex startup ADP, and it's like 8 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks. At a certain point, it might even be like, 10 could get up to 11. Who knows with all these quarterback craze people in Dynasty. But it's also the thing where you could see like 6 or 7 quarterbacks going back to back to back in a Superflex Dynasty. And I just can't get behind that. I remember one redraft league I was in years ago. It was 2 quarterbacks. The first 10 picks were all quarterbacks, Sig. 22 out of the first 24 picks were quarterbacks. So I definitely understand when people say like quarterbacks value too much. They're overvalued in 2 QB or Superflex leagues. And that's where you mentioned like play around with the scoring settings. Instead of having it be 6 points per touchdown, maybe make it 4 points per touchdown, or maybe like do go even crazy where it's like -6 points for interceptions, which I believe the Scott Fish Bowl was last year, and I'm pretty sure it is this year again. Maybe add a little more for rushing attempts so you can balance things up with the running and passing quarterbacks. But there's definitely ways around it that you can try and weigh every position so that they all matter, so that when you are on the clock, it's actually a hard decision deciding between, say, Travis Kelce, DK Metcalf, Christian McCaffrey, and Patrick Mahomes with your first pick in a Superflex leagues, rather than seeing like 7 straight quarterbacks go off the board.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Whenever we start to see drafts get too predictable, then we do something to change it up. And Superflex, indeed, was the reason that it arose. And long before, and that was even before we had Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray and Josh Allen and Deshaun Watson, all these quarterbacks that supplemented their stats so much with rushing stats. We're not just talking Michael Vick, although Michael Vick with Philadelphia kind of turned that on its head. And that the point is that it made it more relevant. Now, that being said, I'm just going to say as an aside, because in typical 1 quarterback leagues, the top quarterbacks score about 30 points a game. And even when you think, well, I can get 23 points a game out of, Tom Brady actually might be worth more than 23 this year, Kirk Cousins or whoever. The point is there's this idea, well, I can just wait. I can get Matt Ryan or something like that. But still, that 5 or 6 point spread in what is typical fantasy football scoring is probably as much or more than the spread between like wide receiver, maybe not wide receiver 1 if it's Devontae Adams last year, but wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 12. We're getting into Joe Bryant VBD, right? Christian McCaffrey actually is about a 30-point a game player, so maybe he also breaks this a little bit. But say, again, running back 2 and running back 12. So it's a significant spread, and it's maybe still being underrated. I guess what I'm saying is in your typical 1 quarterback leagues, the ones you're stuck in, err on the side of maybe taking one of those top 6 or 7 quarterbacks. But what I love also about 2 quarterback, and this is one of the things I think that we've enjoyed, and one of the things I've always enjoyed about interacting with you, Sal, is that it makes quarterback, like you said, it's the most important position. So now, like in rookie drafts in a 1 quarterback league, you probably don't even care about Sam Ellinger. You might care about Ian Book, but in a Superflex league and Dynasty league, you care. Players like Ryan Fitzpatrick can be extremely important in your Superflex league. And he's just someone who probably maybe on the waiver wire in a 1 quarterback league, and getting to know the personalities, getting to know the players, and seeing what's coming. I mean, isn't that really what fantasy football is all about anyway? Is just indulging your obsession with football on whatever level you can. So give yourself more reason to go deeper. That's why I think the next thing is see Sal, like in a couple of years, who out there is going to be like Sal and carry the flag for 2 tight end leagues? Who's going to be Mr. 2 tight ends or Mrs. 2 tight ends or Miss 2 tight ends or Ms. 2 tight ends? Or maybe what would the pronoun be? So I'm behind. I'm an old man. I don't know my pronouns. And of course we'll carry the flag, and we do IDP weekly with Matt Schauf and John Norton, because it just adds more richness, more meaning to everything that you see. on the field, and it gives you a reason to indulge that. So here we are in Superflex now in 2013, like you said, Sal. Did you ever think it would even become as prevalent as it is now?
No, I hoped and I wished it would be because that was my thing. That's what I love playing the most. But there was just so much pushback to it. Just what, like, I guess 8 years ago.
Right.
So it's been crazy. Like we mentioned Scott Fish and Scott Fishbowl. I honestly truly believe that's the reason why Superflex is so popular right now. Because you have a league that's like 1,000 plus. I think it was like 1,400 teams last year. Superflex, even if you didn't like Superflex, you wanted to play in the Scott Fish Bowl because of just like how much fun it is, how much people talk about it. And then once you get into it and you see like all these different crazy scoring settings and roster settings and lineup settings that Scott has played around with, like, okay, it's not so bad to put another quarterback in my starting lineup. I can see it like that. And that's the thing with like one quarterback leagues, like throw out a name like Matt Ryan, for example. He's not someone you want to draft in a one quarterback league, but he's someone who's probably going to average between, say, 15 to 17 fantasy points per game, which is good enough. Like we mentioned, these running quarterbacks who can maybe get into like that 20 to 22 range, which might make people want to draft them a little bit earlier. I've been seeing like this grouping of these running quarterbacks kind of go in like the middle rounds of one quarterback league, say between like round 6 to 8-ish. So I feel like they have kind of like bumped up the value of the quarterback position. But just in general, no one cares about those guys after like, say, quarterback 15 in one quarterback leagues. They're just like, I can get QB 15, I can get QB 23. They're probably going to score the exact same amount of points. But when you flip that over to Superflex, that's a huge difference because if, say, all of a sudden you don't have like 2 top 15 guys in your Superflex league, maybe you decided to wait and you're like, okay, well, I'm used to like not drafting quarterback early. I'm just going to wait. You could get by if you like are hardcore into studying the position. But I've seen it people who like get, say, like QB 23 and 24 in their 2 QB or Superflex league, and they just like want to pull their hair out by the end of the season. So, like, I just didn't understand just how big of a difference it was adding that extra quarterback spot. And I think one of the things I remember when I first started writing about 2 quarterback leagues is people like, there's not enough quarterbacks to go around. Like, we want us to start 24 of them now, but just look at the amount of turnover there is at the position. I know last year might be an anomaly because it was COVID. You had to deal with people like quarterbacks like Cam Newton getting COVID, but in general, there is usually a high amount of turnover at the quarterback position year in, year out. Like last season, there was 59 different quarterbacks who started at least one game. Now, that does include 3 who started in the week 7, Chad Henne, so Patrick Mahomes is getting rest, but John Wolford had to start for Jared Goff, Mason Rudolph had to start for Pittsburgh. So, but we usually see at least between like 50 to 54 every year. And there's that one year where like Ryan Mallett started for 3 different teams, like one quarterback starting for 3 different teams. So when you want to say like there aren't enough quarterbacks, just look at the numbers.
Yeah, and what's fun is, or not fun, like you said, in a Superflex league, you're determining in week 10 whether to even sitting on your waiver wire bucks. Like, am I going to really put 600 on Jeff Driscoll? Well, otherwise, what am I going to do? And it makes it so the Houston Texans quarterback situation right now, Tyrod Taylor, David Smith, not Ryan Finley. We know that. Jeff Driscoll. I mean, you pay attention to these things. And it also, just like everything else, what's the next step in this conversation, Sal? Like, 0 quarterback drafting, right? Like, here's how to pull off your 0 quarterback draft. But I think that it's fun because the wider range of possible strategies, the more things you have to weigh when you're making these decisions, the more interesting the league becomes. And sure enough, either it does become a tipping point where it's smart to go the opposite direction of the herd. So messing around with something like, well, hey, if you're stacked and you go into week 1 with Cam Newton and I don't know who can I pick out, like Ben Roethlisberger, as your 2 quarterbacks, that can still work. And especially if you're anticipating, I always like to say skate where the puck's going to be. Although pain, nothing but hockey pain right now. Am I being too on the nose by talking about hockey with you?
Oh, no, I'm a Penguins fan, so this is why we jump.
Oh, Mike, can we just skip cut straight to the chase right here? Well, first of all, how did you become a Penguins fan?
cereal boxes, Mario
Uh-huh.
Lemieux, Canada. So back in the day, they would put posters in like
Yep.
cereal boxes or Kraft mac and cheese. Very first one I got was Mario Lemieux.
Hmm.
Then my dad was at a Canadian Tire. I'm not sure they have those in the States. Basically like a Home Depot, home hardware type store. And there was a Mario Lemieux VHS, basically like teaching you how to play hockey.
Hmm.
And like I wore out that VHS tape
Wow.
every single day of my life. I think, yeah, sure. I got fortunate that the first hockey player that I was introduced to was Mario Lemieux,
Right.
who is the greatest hockey player of all time.
Yes.
But
Thank you.
I'm not gonna say anything bad about that. Yeah, I got lucky, but who cares? I got to root for Mario Lemieux basically his entire career, which I just loved every single second of it. So that's how I became a hockey fan.
Yeah. Did you, again, I feel like I'm being way too on the nose when I say this. Ice skating.
Oh, I tried to learn how to skate. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I couldn't either.
I would play boot hockey. That was as
Exactly.
good as I could get.
We would do take the tennis net down in the tennis court, and we would play. We would just play street hockey.
I mean, the nice thing about growing up in Canada is there's a hockey rink every block.
Right. So my Mario Lemieux, and I'm saying this because I need to flush and exercise the demons from last night. Okay. Yeah, my Mario Lemieux stories growing up in the Pittsburgh area, and his name means the greatest. His name means the greatest. And maybe there was some hanky-panky in how the Penguins ended up getting him. I don't know. Okay. I'm not going to talk about
That's above our pay grade.
We were kids. We were just kids, Do you still have that box, that Kraft mac and cheese box, by the way?
No, but I have the poster. Like I kept the poster. It's in storage.
Well, these things are important. I see Val K in the chat room saying Darius Kasparaitis. Yeah, he was on those teams. One of the Stanley Cup winning teams, at least I know. He was. They needed an enforcer, but Mario, he was like a folk hero. He was even before they won the Stanley Cup, even before he saved the team, even before he came back from cancer. My Lord, the stories. He's a French Canadian with a Pittsburgh accent. You know what I mean? He's incredible. I remember I caddied when I was 14 or 15 on this tour called the Ben Hogan Tour. It was like the minor league golf tour that came through in a new golf course in Western Pennsylvania in the 90s. And he was part of the Pro-Am. And if he was at a hole, you couldn't. It was like the Masters or something. Like you could not see the tee. You could not get anywhere near that hole whenever his group was on that hole. Anyway, he would do things back in the 80s when the Penguins were still terrible that looked like some sort of Paul Bunyan thing. I mean, he was incredible. But again, we'll maybe come back to hockey a little bit later, and any number of other things. Because the Penguins, really, Sal, I know you've been watching hockey your whole life, right? Have you ever seen a more ignominious way for a playoff overtime game to end ever?
If I said I did, I'm probably lying.
Right? I mean, maybe an own goal. Maybe if someone actually put it in their own net. But I don't think I've ever seen that. You can't go. Who has the best goalie? That's who's going to win in the playoffs, and it's not the Penguins.
It's not even the best goalie, just the hottest goalie, right? I mean, we've seen in the past with the Penguins, like when Matt Murray went on a run, Marc-Andre Fleury went on a run. It's all about that momentum.
They got rid of the wrong goalie. If they had just kept Fleury, why would you ever get rid of Fleury? Why wasn't Fleury a player that you just said you're going to retire a Pittsburgh Penguin? I have no idea.
I feel like he wanted to.
Yeah, he did. He's our kind of guy, Sal. His nickname is Flower. His nickname is Flower.
I can't get too upset because the cool thing about rooting for Matt Murray, he's from my hometown.
Wow.
Thunder Bay, where the Stahl brothers are from.
Oh, wow. And then you have a connection to some Penguins Stanley Cup winners. All right. We're losing. I can see if there is some sort of Arbitron ratings thing. Look, I'll say this. And I'm not going to promise that we're done with hockey talk, okay? We may come back to it. But if you don't watch hockey, if you don't care about hockey, the playoffs are the best time to get into it. And it is really, who was it? Was it every day should be Sunday, Saturday? I mean, somebody said playoff overtime hockey. You could just do you could just mainline cocaine, or you could watch playoff overtime hockey, right?
I think that was our good buddy Pat Thorman.
Or was it Pat Thorman?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean the point is like it is incredible, heart thumping, like true sport drama. Even if you don't care about who wins, you just feel it like it jumps through the TV screen at you. Okay, let's go back to Scott Fish because we can talk about Scott Fish real quickly. You brought up the Fish Bowl and it's coming around here, and like you said, Scott Fish, you're very generous to give him credit as one of the pioneers of taking to the large, like Johnny Appleseed, spreading the word, the gospel of Superflex of 2 quarterbacks, but a point per first down. Let's see, or otherwise scoring more by, because some people don't like PPR. They say, what's a reception really worth? Oh, first down, that's worth something.
Right.
And just in general, efficiency stats, like you said, he has a 2 quarterback system, but if you start a bad quarterback, it can hurt your team.
Yes. It's going to kill you, absolutely kill you.
So you go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure we saw quarterbacks score like negative 20, negative 25 points in the Scott Fish Bowl last year. I was a victim of it, mainly because I was playing with my heart, not my head. I started Alex Smith instead of Jalen Hurts, and Alex Smith got like maybe 6 points, where Jalen Hurts at that week had like 60 is like one of his big implosion games. I got kicked out of the Scott Fish Bowl that week, but if I was smart, I knew what I was talking about when it comes to fantasy football. I obviously would have started Jalen Hurts, but I just wanted to root for Alex Smith so much that I left him in there. But yeah, it's pretty crazy that if you can have a quarterback, because usually you think, okay, I'm going to start a quarterback over a wide receiver or tight end, he's going to automatically score at least 10 to 12 points more than that non-quarterback. But no, not in the Scott Fish Bowl. In the Scott Fish Bowl, there is a legitimate chance you could get negative points from a bad quarterback. And then just adds to the strategy. Like if you're in the Scott Fish Bowl and you want to wait on drafting your second quarterback, you better not wait to the point where Davis Mills is or Tyrod Taylor is your QB2, because those guys could put up duds any week, where that's the point where maybe, okay, now I have a legitimate dilemma on my hands of, do I start the quarterback who I think would get more points, or do I start like this WR4 or tight end 3 who, even though he might not get like 6 or 7 points, he definitely probably will not get me negative 18 points.
Yeah, well, you're looking at matchups. You know, you're looking at, Tampa Bay. Oh, do you want to risk that? I mean, actually, Tampa Bay also gave up a big game to Matt Ryan last year, I think, when Julio was hurt. So you're walking that tightrope, and that's what makes it more fun, and it innovates. And have you played a guillotine league yet? Are you familiar with Paul Charchian's guillotine leagues?
I've never played them, but I am aware of them.
Yeah. So the point is just innovation. It's we have it's like a board game set with these pieces and dice, but the board is blank. You can draw whatever game you want on that board to play and try things. I think we're at a point, Sal, where what we think of as fantasy football could take an entire quantum leap, especially with more young people, more technology. Obviously, we could get into things like there's like player props and gambling and all kinds of other things. It's all blending, but I think folks should bring their ideas, whatever they are. Be fearless like Sal and carry the flag for something that you think makes it fun for you. And sure enough, the world will eventually catch up. When I say Scott Fish, also Scott Fish is synonymous for using his platform for good. Right, John Bosch also is doing great stuff. I got 2 different eliminators going on. We were in the same Scott Fish Bowl division last year.
We were in the Scott Fish Bowl together last year.
Or did I beat you? I don't even remember. I think you beat me.
I mean, I'm going to be a good guess and say no comment.
It's okay. I can handle it. So there's a lot of good stuff going on. And I always like to say, Cecil and I would like to say, Sal, like if the thing you're worried about most is how your fantasy team did, then your life's probably going okay. You're
right.
and especially in the end of the year, if you win the championship, like, think about kicking something down to people whose life might not be going okay. And Scott and John Bosch and lots of other people are doing great work using their platform for good. And I know that you are somebody who's always been very conscious of that you have a platform. How has that journey been for you?
I mean, it's had its ups and downs over the years. I mean, the great thing is, like, say, take the Fantasy Cares Eliminators, for example, that John Bosch is running right now. We donate money, we play fantasy, it's great, but there's so many different ways we can take that. So, for example, my Fantasy Eliminator Cares last year, everyone started running a pool of extra donations to basically pick who I would take with my first round pick. And we did that again this year. I'm like, everyone donate as much as you can. Whoever donates the highest amount gets to pick who I take in the first round. And we ended up raising over $600 so that I could take Tim Tebow with my first round pick. Would I want to win my Fantasy Cares Eliminator League? Yeah, sure. The likelihood of that actually happening is pretty low. So why not just do something good with it, have fun, and just raise extra cash for charity? And what we've seen is, like, I think John sent out a tweet the other day. They've already raised over $30,000 off these Fantasy Cares Eliminators. I think the SFB Potathon, hosted by the Salito and Kevin and Steve last year, I think they ended up getting like $70,000. I can't even imagine what that number is going to be this year if we've already raised over $30K just from eliminators. So I like to have fun with fantasy, but I also like to use that platform when I can to like highlight different causes if possible. Even if I might not have the funds to donate something, even a simple tweet for like raising awareness. So like if I can't donate, maybe you can't donate, but I retweeted, then you retweeted, someone else sees that tweet, like, okay, I'll donate to this today. And there's just so much about how great that is in the community and just how many people are doing good with their platform. Like, I know this off season, Football Guys just hired an insane amount of talented folks. And one of those guys is Troy King. And if you go on his timeline, timeline Troy, positive Troy, always trying to bring that upbeat energy, that high energy to everyone, just keeping things positive. And I think we should focus more on that in the fantasy community at times, rather than like how many people are kind of like complaining about what people may or may not be saying on their timeline that isn't very nice about other people. So like focus less on the negativity and focus more on the positivity.
Oh, it's an exercise every day, right? Social media is really strange in some ways. Well, it's strange, but then it circles back around to being so sensible that it's almost painful. I mean, not necessarily sensible, I should say revealing. It's revealing. It's revealing about human nature. I always like to say, even going way back, Sal, one of the things I always like to say, there's a lot of things I like to say. I like to talk. That's why we're here today. You reveal things about yourself on social media, but not what you think you're revealing, not what you intend to reveal, but other things. And you're right. It's kind of nice because I think so I think you and I are simpatico on multiple levels, in the sense that we kind of have there's similar things in our code, or that we even have a code, that you will hear people say, wow, it was a really bad day in fantasy football Twitter today, and people need to check themselves. And I'll say, well, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah. Because it just depends on who you follow or what you engage in or what you get snared in as far as discussions. But there's a side of the fantasy football Twitter that is so uplifting. And you mentioned Troy. Troy is like a black belt in being positive. I mean, it's incredible. It just flows from him. And I think that it allows him to surround himself with positivity. And that's, I think, what a lot of us are trying to do. But we're also extremely supportive. You talked about other causes out there. I'm thinking about our guy, Rumford Johnny, who's part of the MFL 10 of Death 7 or 8 we're up to now. I don't know. We're doing it right now, and I think he's leaving Twitter. But he does incredible work for autistic adults that need caregivers. And the fantasy football community, like you said, maybe I'm not money bags, but I can help people, connect people, or say, hey, this is something that you can help, that is something good. And fantasy football Twitter has actually been a force for good. And the internet has so many, internet communities have so many negative connotations now. And somehow we have been I think, mostly positive community that generally creates, the FF Fit Club. I mean, creating positive outcomes, encouraging each other to be positive. How has that been? Because you are an unrelentingly good person, Sal. I'm going to make you blush. And that's one of the reasons I always enjoy our interactions. I always enjoy being in part of any corner of our little sandbox that you're part of. It's a long time coming. I don't know. I'm so glad that we're getting a chance to do this show right now. But where did that come from? In your personality or in just your ethos as a human, to be positive?
I think it was just growing up around my mom, who was just always so nice to everybody. Not so much my dad. My dad could be an asshole, but he was the type of person, like, the way you treated him is the way he would treat you. So like if
Ooh.
you were super nice to him, he would be super nice to you. But man, if you crossed him, hell on earth was about to come down on you. But my mom was the complete opposite. She was just like nice to everybody. I think there's also a little bit of that. No, that being Canadian, we're just nice to everybody in general. It's just the way it is. We're always cooped up with snow all year long, so it's just nice to have some interaction with people once the snow is gone. But it was just a simple thing. It's like, why be an asshole? Because there was a period of my time where I kind of did become an asshole for a bit in my teenage years, and I just like had to look at myself in the mirror, like, well, why do you have to be rude to this person when you could just be nice instead? Like, it's just so easy to be nice to people, right? Like, you can you see someone walking down the street, they're having a struggle carrying their bags, like, hey, can I help you with that? Like, that takes like 2 seconds, and it's not gonna impact the rest of your day whatsoever. So it's just all about being nice, being positive, because it's just so easy to do. So I feel like it's hard to be an asshole. Like, you'd have to go out of your way to be rude to someone and treat them like crap, or else you just go the opposite way and like every day just be good, be kind. It's like there was that show I used to watch back then, My Name is Earl. Like, do good things happen. So like I like to take that mantra with me every day. And I feel like we've been very fortunate in fantasy football Twitter specifically, that for the most part, like 98% of the community is super positive, super happy, always nice, always willing to help. And when there is like a bad egg or a bad seed, they get called out on it pretty quickly. And they're just kind of like, either they realize the error of their ways or they just leave. We don't have to deal with them anymore.
Right. It's like an immune system. Fantasy football Twitter has an immune system now. And it's been something to behold, as you said, whenever someone tries to, kill our buzz, right? Interrupt our positive vibes. And you're absolutely right. What's the old canard, Sal? It takes more muscles to frown in your face than it does to smile, right? But really, to stay negative, and we all are fighting our battle every day with this. You reference like different points in your life. You have to grip and hold on to something to stay negative, and you just have to let go to be nice. It's good too, because I'm living down here in New Orleans. New Orleans is a painfully nice place. It's a painfully nice place because it's also a place that is the object of so much corruption, so much injustice, so much cruelty, like senseless cruelty. Remember, you just go back to Katrina, the city that care forgot. That's one of the nicknames. That's good and bad. I mean, usually it means like we don't care. We're just going to have a good time. But at the same time, but people here are so kind. What I like to say, Sal, is everybody has the twinkle in their eye. It's like a sense of, and I saw this when I traveled to India earlier in my life, where there's just a sense of gratitude. It's just gratitude to be alive. Just what a thing it is to get to be a human being in this time and place and experience all these sensations and have this, like your body's like a spaceship and you get to do all these adventures in this amazing space. Like how incredible is that? And you don't need anything more than that, than just that you got to get on the ride. I mean, like a kid at an amusement park. We're on the ride right now. Enjoy the ride. And I think that I always come back to, I've mentioned this film periodically, Wings of Desire. It's a Wim Wenders film. It's about, it starts out with two angels who are watching the human beings. And it's like their job basically is to chronicle these life-affirming moments. Like this, it was pouring down rain and this old lady closed her umbrella and let the rain soak her. And they just go around and they chronicle, like, what did you see today? But one of the angels, all he wants is to experience a sensation. Like he watches somebody like, smell, coffee brewing or feel the sunlight on their face or something like that. And because they're angels, they don't get to experience that. They just watch all of us experience it. And so on and so forth. But the point is, you already have the most incredible thing right now. You already are rich beyond your wildest dreams right now because you get to experience life. And if you can embrace that gratitude and put that gratitude at the center of yourself, then all those good things flow. And then, like you said, good follows good. And you don't get to decide what moments in your life are important. Like you said, helping someone with their groceries. That could be a moment that keeps somebody from, like, I don't want to be too dramatic, like say keeps them from committing suicide or something. But you don't know what's important. You don't know what small gestures or what things where you recognize. And I always like to say this too, that everybody wants to just feel like they're seen and heard. Everybody just wants to feel like that they're seen and that they're heard. And when you see and hear somebody, and then actually it gives you an impulse to do something positive, you have no idea what changes that can make downstream. And so this is all good. This is our positive moment. But I'm going to bring it back to living in Canada, being a Canadian. Do you feel sometimes like y'all live above a meth lab?
Maybe more so living in Vancouver.
So this is, and you're so positive on to do that, but really, if we heard how, and I'm not saying you, I'm just saying like typical Canadians, although typical Canadians, again, like you said, are going to be kind people. What's the feeling right now about the United States? Because I remember going to New Zealand, and it's a similar sort of relationship between Australia and New Zealand, where there's like the boorish, obnoxious but very successful, or at least they think they're very successful, like cousin, and then there's the more sensible, level-headed cousin, and like, well, we're kind of embarrassed of them, but yeah, they are our cousin.
I feel it's definitely better now in the year 2021 than it was for a few years prior to that. We don't need to go into the exact reasons why, but I feel like, I mean, me personally, I've always looked at the United States as like a better Canada in some ways. There's just like more freedom, more things you can do. You get access to all the cool stuff we don't get in Canada, or you get it before we do. So we have to wait for almost like when you have a kid and then you have a second kid, you hand down the clothes for the first kid to the second kid, right? But then again, in Canada, I feel like we just have like a lot more freedom in terms of just what we want to do on an everyday basis, and it just feels a lot more safer to me. I'm always pretty apprehensive about a lot of things in life in general, so this doesn't apply to every single Canadian, but I worry a lot more than other people do in general. So like if I have to travel to the States, there's always a lot of things going in my head. It's like, well, that place is going to be so much crowded, it's going to cost so much money. You hear about all these stories about like the violence on the streets, but the violence is everywhere in the world. I just like to worry more than I should. But I've had a pretty lucky relationship with the United States. Like I grew up in a border town. Like it would take me 45 minutes to drive to the Minnesota border. It would take me 6 hours to drive to Minneapolis. But I do feel like maybe Minnesota, Minneapolis is kind of more Canadian than they are American. So maybe I have that kinship with them in that regards. But I just look at it as if like I live in Canada. I can go to the States if I want to. I just don't really want to.
Yeah, I understand. And but going the other way, if I were to say like we can take a trip to Canada, like where should Americans prioritize? Like what are the best places to go if you can only check out one or two places in Canada?
Well, I've got to be super biased, definitely Vancouver, especially if you love the outdoors and nature. And like we have Stanley Park, which I guess you can kind of compare to Central Park in New York. Like that's the one go-to tourist spot. Montreal is another cool place, especially if you are a foodie. Like, you get the Montreal smoked meat sandwiches, you get the poutines, get to learn a little bit of French Canadian, and it's just a beautiful place in general, especially like Montreal. So those would be the top two places I would recommend.
Yeah, Montreal, it's not even that far of a drive at all. Like even if you live in like the city, New York City, or especially if you live in upstate New York or New England, Montreal's not that far to get to at all. And it has a different side of Canadian culture from say Toronto, which is a lot more accessible for a larger part of the American. I went to Toronto when I was in high school. I mean, just whatever, go to the Sky Dome, go see Phantom of the Opera at the Pantage Theater, and so on. But then there's also like I've also learned about like just from things like Anthony Bourdain, like Newfoundland, Newfies, and there's all kinds of cool stuff like orcas, right? Victoria Island, is that it? Like, there's an island close to Vancouver where like it's like the main place to study orcas in the world. I think people hear the siren song there and stay there because they just feel like some sort of communion. And there's a lot. There's so much. Canada. And now, and I will spare any jokes about the Steelers offensive coordinator here. Let's circle back around because I know that it'd be way too easy for me at this point to spin off and forget about where you've been talking about football or the football community or anything like that. Tell me somebody else while we go back to the idea of people doing good or otherwise. our community. Shout out. I'm going to give you a chance. You already shouted out Troy and Scott and John. Shout out somebody else, maybe somebody who isn't quite as well known that you think is another force for positivity or good in our community.
I mean, there's definitely a lot. I'm always bad with remember names. I remember the cause more.
Right.
So
Sure.
I know there's the Warrior Bowl that
Mhm.
kind of was like they saw Scott Fishbowl as like an examples of doing good in the community and raising money for their charity. I think if you just look up Warrior Bowl on Twitter, you'll be able to find all the information. I want to say his name is Chris, but don't quote me on that. There is like the mental health initiative, mental health awareness. Again, I'm bad with names as always, but I feel like there might have been, I think, like Anthony Servino, Michael Hoff. I'm probably saying that wrong. Sam Hoppin was involved. I mean, we've seen it a lot in, I say, like the past 1 or 2 years on fantasy Twitter, how much we talk about our mental health and how important that is, especially if you're in the fantasy community and you're on that daily grind of researching, writing, podcasting. It can get to you if all you do is immerse yourself in the world of fantasy football, especially if you're the type of person that takes every little slight to heart. Like if you write up a recommended start for the week and he just bombs and you take that too seriously, like, oh, I let everybody down, that's going to get to you mentally. Like people definitely need breaks. Like I've come and gone from the fantasy Twitter community like at least 2 or 3 times during the course of my stay. So I know how important it is to just keep your mental health in check. So there's the mental health initiative, mental health awareness. I know they had a telethon, podathon last year. So it was like based around Hayden Hurst's charity because he's really big into mental health. So like, yeah, there's honestly, there's so many people out there, even like not someone who might not have a charity or not, but no, Daddy's Home FF, Mike, I'm going to butcher his name, Mike Falala, I believe. It's Mike F, but everyone calls him Daddy's Home. He's just like Troy, right? You go on his timeline, it's all about positivity, keeping things happy, just making sure we're not focused on all like the douchebags out there, right? Like, yeah. Like I feel like I could probably go through my Twitter timeline and probably say something nice about everybody.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I mean, it's not difficult. And like you said, it's another one of those things. I think there was that Simpsons Halloween episode where it's like, just don't pay attention to them, and then they'll go away. Right. You know, it's something we teach like our 8-year-old. You know, oh, this kid's bothering me. Well, just stop paying attention to him, and he'll go away. He'll find somebody else to bother, and he'll probably bother the person who seems the most bothered by what he's doing. Right? You brought up a lot of good stuff there. First thing I want to say. Is you mentioned a lot of good causes out there. Anybody out there, if you have ideas for how to harness the fantasy football community for good, or you're doing something already and you want a little signal boost, let me know. Because in a lot of ways, that's really much more important than telling you who to pick to win your league. But like you said, it can be rough because, you know, we're out there, we're kind of naked with our calls, like the dreams where you're like naked in front of the class. Like we're kind of naked in front of the class whenever we're making these calls, and sometimes it can go very wrong because really we probably understand about 10 or 20% of what creates the outcome of a player's game. You know what I mean? When we're right, we're right sometimes for reasons we have to go ahead.
I mean, you're brave saying 10 to 20%. I would say like 0.5% for myself.
Sure. We're taking responsibility in some ways. Well, I always say we pretend that we can predict the future. You know, that's part of what this is. I'm sensitive and I'm lucky that people are so kind to me because people probably don't realize, like, I probably would take a pretty hard, like, as it is, I have a critic in my head who's constantly yammering away at me and saying like the meanest thing it could possibly come up with. So if somebody out there in the world actually agreed with that thing, I'd say, oh no, that thing might actually be right. But people are very, very kind. And I think everybody does a good job in general. In general, the only people I see that people will come at like fangs bared are the people who try to convince everybody that they have access to some special knowledge that is at the top of the mountain and only they have it. And they project themselves that way. So when that knowledge ends up being incorrect, people kind of do the, you know, back to the Simpsons, like, But the flip side of that is you mentioned mental health is that fantasy football, I think in general, is therapy for people, especially us dudes who aren't in touch with our emotions very well. Like I never learned how to identify or deal with my emotions when I was a kid. They were just kind of like the weather. And so even whenever things are going bad with your fantasy team, it's still a shelter from all the other things in your life, right? Like when you're managing your fantasy teams or putting together your rankings or preparing for your draft or writing your articles or doing a podcast like we are right now, you still are kind of insulated from the actual stuff in your life that can have like claws and scratch and tear because life is hard. And then it makes it harder whenever you can be immersed in fantasy football, like those of us who have either done it as like a side pursuit or a primary pursuit, when you have to go back and deal with regular life, you know? And I think that one of the things that, not necessarily by design, is that people in the fantasy football community, like we can be honest with each other and feel like there's not a sense of judgment. There's not a sense of, that you're going to be singled out. You can really be honest about what's going on in your life. Maybe in a way that you can't with people that are close to you in your life because, well, maybe they're part of what is difficult. And I've found that sometimes even in like passing interactions with people, I can feel like a sense of unburdening in a way that isn't necessarily part of like a feature, like while you get into fantasy football and fantasy football Twitter, that we end up having some sort of kinship or closeness or a sense of being able to let your guard down. And that's something that I've taken away from it. I always like to, here's one of the things I always like to say, Sal, is that like getting to do this is a gift for me. Like getting to have people listen to me. Because like I said, when I say people all want to be seen and heard, I'm talking about myself, right? Like I like to say, probably essentially when I'm podcasting or tweeting and I'm looking to see who replied to my tweet, I'm basically saying, can anybody hear me? And someone says, yeah, I can hear you. And I say, oh, good. That makes me feel better. Thank you. And we all do that for each other. And it's excellent. All right. I'm going to turn the page here. And we're close enough now that I can say, I don't even feel like we have to talk about football. And look, folks, it's May 25th. There'll be OTA. There'll be, don't worry. Football Guys are still churning out content every day, 4 for 4. Well, let me ask you about that to start out with. What is you said was your title? What does it say on your Twitter bio? Like director of fun stuff? Is that right?
Head of fun stuff.
Head of fun stuff.
Only full-time employees get to be called director of something at 4 for 4. I learned that one.
I'm sorry, the head of fun stuff. So
but it's a cooler name than director. So screw all those guys.
Yeah,
I love everyone at 4 for 4. I'm joking.
So yeah. What's head of? First of all, what a great job title to get, head of fun stuff. But then also that's a responsibility because, fun, not everybody just can have fun or show people how to have fun. What's a part of your duties of being the head of fun stuff?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of duties. I'll say the fun parts is I'm getting to run the 4 for 4 Twitter account, coming up with like show ideas. Like I came up with this idea for the 4-minute drill, basically interviewing people, asking them 4 fantasy football questions in what was supposed to be 4 minutes. But I learned the hard way that you can't have a fantasy football show in 4 minutes. So it's my good buddy George Criticos at RotoHack has dubbed it the 4 plus 4 minute drill. So that also works. But we just came up with a new basketball show. We have a new best ball show coming out soon. I've been at like the forefront of the creative stages and all of that. Trying to find people to work for 4 for 4, being asked my opinion on content ideas, like all this fun stuff. Like I just feel like I'm a valuable member of 4 for 4, and there's just like so much that I do behind the scenes. Like if I tried to list them right now, we'd be here for like another 70 minutes.
I'm jealous because I always like to say I'm a starter, but not necessarily a doer or a finisher. So if I just get to come in, like you're saying, and help with ideas and help shepherd along the process, but then other people actually do it, like that'd be perfect. I'm going to get back to something very micro, and then we'll go back to a breezy talk because John Hogan, the chat room asked, Sal, how many quarterbacks should, all caps, go in the first round of the Scott Fish Bowl 11?
See, John is just trying to troll me into saying something that I don't want to say because I give him a hard time about Trevor Lawrence being a first-round pick in Superflex Startup Dynasty because he's the one that runs the ADPs with Ryan McDowell. So I feel a part of it is his philosophy because he's known as Mr. QBX. He'll draft like 18 quarterbacks before he'll draft any other position. So I like to blame him for this Trevor Lawrence ADP. But in Scott Fish Bowl, man, like we've talked about how many times on the show negative points from quarterbacks that could get you in the Scott Fish Bowl. I would say probably between 5 to 6, but I would not be surprised if we see like 8 to 10 go in certain draft. And that's the great thing about Scott Fish Bowl, right? Every draft is completely different. You can't look at ADP in Scott Fish Bowl. It does not matter.
I know. When you do the Scott Fish Bowl, you get major envy when you look at other drafts. And you think, wow.
Yes, right.
And the worst thing you can do is like, well, if I was drafting from the 7 hole in this draft, I would have this team, man.
I think that
And
happened to us in our draft last year.
yeah,
Like ours was pretty quarterback heavy. Like I know I wanted to wait, but everyone else in the draft was not letting us do so.
no, and it's scary. That's that whole mass psychology thing of a fantasy football draft. What's the study? That study that's always cited, the one where they have everybody in the study is a plant except for one person who's actually the subject, and they ask them simple questions like which line is the longest, and when everybody starts saying the line that's the second longest is actually the longest, the subject just starts eventually agreeing with them and saying, well, I guess I should just agree with them even though they're wrong, because there's all kinds of layers to human psychology of why people end up doing that. It's often cited when we get into, sadly, like atrocities and different things that have happened in human history, where we try to say, well, how could that happen? How could regular human beings go along with these things? And a fantasy football draft can be like that. In some ways, it's actually wise, because even if you don't want to go quarterback early, if they're all dried up, whatever positional advantage. So here's one of my super flex. Here you go, Sal. You can tell me whether you think this is just like nonsense. So for folks starting up in super flex, so let's say you heard Sal's speech at the beginning of this, and you're like, I want to do a super flex league. Or you convince your league mates, let's do Superflex this year. How do you draft in a Superflex league? Or how do you handle the change? And this is what I like to say. For the first few rounds, you should either take let's say the first 4 or 5 rounds, you should either take a quarterback, or the non-quarterback you take, you should be getting a round later than you would normally get them. What do you think of that?
Oh, no, that makes sense, because we see if quarterbacks go early in Superflex leagues, it just drops all the other running backs, receivers, tight ends down the board. You see it all the time, whether it's a rookie draft, a startup draft, a redraft league. And that's just another great thing about Superflex leagues. Okay, you don't want to take a quarterback. Maybe you're picking like at the end of the first round, like 11 other teams. Maybe let's say 7 of those teams take a quarterback. Like you're going to get someone at like 112 or 111 who normally would go at 102, 103. I think that's one of the more appealing things of Superflex leagues. Like if you don't care about the quarterback position, and all of a sudden you see Alvin Kamara at the end of the first round, you probably feel like you're winning the lottery.
Exactly right. So yeah, if you're picking at the turn in a Superflex league, you could end up with Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara. And then again, are you comfortable with Cam Newton and Ben Roethlisberger as your starting quarterbacks? Well, you'll find out. But
right.
I think that's a good, again, if you're a beginner in Superflex and you're not sure how to navigate your first draft or your first year doing Superflex drafts, just think of it that way, because you probably are experienced and savvy enough in your typical drafts to know, like, oh, like I usually, to get AJ Brown, I usually have to take him in the top 15 picks. If I can get him in the early 3rd round, then I'm not doing something crazy by passing on Joe Burrow for him or whatever.
You have more of a chance of drafting an AJ Brown type. I'm not saying you're going to get an AJ Brown in like the 3rd or 4th round, but you have a better chance of getting a decent enough quarterback in like say round 3 or round 4 as you would say getting like an AJ Brown earlier. Like you want those receivers, because an AJ Brown type player isn't going to be available like round 5 or round 6. But a quarterback who's going to get maybe like 14 to 15 fantasy points per week is going to be available just because of how much supply there is at that position.
Yeah, it's fun, and I hope reach out. And if you're doing Superflex and you're gonna, we want to encourage you. So reach out, and we can help. What other things? What else? Other things are you passionate? What's something else that you're passionate about other than Alex Smith?
I don't even get to be passionate about Alex Smith anymore.
Well, sure, you could be passionate. It was a great story, and I'm happy for Alex Smith, but I'm glad he's retiring.
Right. Well, Gardner Minshew, Taysom Hill. But if we're not talking about football, I love my family dog. Like I love animals. I love taking my dog for a walk. I love watching wrestling, which is weird because I like stopped watching for a large percentage of my adulthood, but I got back into it. But honestly, I'm a pretty boring person, and like the most important thing for me is just like family and relaxation time. Like I don't have too many passions that I'm super obsessed about.
No, but relaxation time, again, Sal, I think we share some wavelengths, and I absolutely like. I think some people, what's the line from the Pink Floyd song? Like, I missed the starting gun. Like, I think some people like like the starting gun in a race. You know what I mean? Like life is like, and we're off.
Right.
And I'm remembering my late friend Jim Schwanden, who he died in his early 20s of brain cancer. And he said, and we would talk about these things. He said, I just hope I have a good seat to watch it. You know, that's all I want. I just want a good seat. And I think we would add, based on what you said, like good people around me. And it doesn't really matter what's happening around otherwise, as long as those things are true. Yeah, I like family time. I love, well, see, I don't want to say I'm not a dog person, but we had Rottweilers and Dobermans, all kinds of stuff growing up. But we've got our two cats here. I feel like our two cats are like our rock, the rocks, especially getting through COVID and being cooped up. Like you're a rock. We can depend on you. And yeah, it's great because the animals give their love to us unconditionally. Like we think we know about unconditional love, but our pets really understand unconditional love, and it's touching. I've noticed cooking. You weave cooking into fantasy football. Am I imagining that, or did that really happen?
No. Back in the day, my parents used to have a pizza stand that I would help out, and one of my duties was slicing the pizza up and putting it in a box. And one day, I was like really super bored. I'm like, what if I just wrote some fantasy advice on top of this pizza box? And at the time, I was reading like a Chris Allen article, and so like I just basically wrote out a portion of his article onto the box and I wrote out the whole URL of the article on the pizza box, and I tweeted out, and I just called it "Fantasy Advice by the Slice."
I mean, you know, see, this is why you're the head of fun stuff, because that's fun stuff. You know, that's what you put on your resume whenever you're applying for the job of head of fun stuff. What else? Oh, man. Well, okay, because my brain is just what's on. See, I don't want to. It's 3 minutes, and we're really turning this on to couch if I just do total free association, like hold up the ink blot and say, "What do you see whenever you look at this ink blot?" I guess I'll ask you this, because I know, like, you get closer up north, you'll see like Tim Hortons and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What is a good standard bearer for Canada in something that, like, Americans, like, if you go to Canada and you try this, you'll understand, you'll get the Canadian soul a little bit more than you did before.
I probably have. There's so many different answers for so many different people because we all like and hate so many things. Definitely not Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons. Please stop associating.
You just lost our Tim Horton endorsement. Thanks. No.
Please don't associate Canada with Tim Hortons. We got a few things, like poutine is always probably the top one that I would tell people. If you love fries and cheese with gravy, there you go. In where I was born and raised in Thunder Bay, we have this very unique pastry. It's called the Persian. It's basically a donut with like raspberry icing on top, and for some reason we originated here. You can't. Well, some places in Canada try to replicate the recipe, but they can't. So for some reason, you ever find yourself in Thunder Bay, Ontario, just go find a Persian man. Get a Persian, enjoy it. If you're out in British Columbia, Vancouver, we have another thing. It's called the Nanaimo bar. It's kind of like a coconut graham cracker crust on the bottom with like icing in the middle and then chocolate on top. So that's another good one. I personally am a huge fan of ketchup chips. I know a lot of people don't like ketchup. I don't know why it's not really a thing in America as much as it is in Canada. Like, you see people asking you to like send them bags of ketchup chips. I mean, I would grow up buying ketchup chips all the time as a kid. I didn't know this was a thing where they weren't in America freely. So I always found that kind of weird. People love drinking beer here. I mean, I haven't had a drink in like 15 years, so I can't recommend beers. Like this whole IPA craft beer craze, I just completely missed it. But growing up, I knew that our beers are stronger than like our American counterparts. So if you come to Canada, maybe get like a I don't want to say Molson Canadian because that was never that good, or Labatt Blue, but those are the ones we were most associated with. I was always a fan of like the Crystal beer, so that's a decent one. And Steam Whistle. If you ever go to Toronto, I believe that's where the brewery is. If you're into drinking beer, go to the Steam Whistle Brewery.
The Persian in Thunder Bay is that's what you come for, folks.
Yeah.
That's why you listen to On the Couch, because one day in your life you'll be in Thunder Bay and you'll get a Persian and you'll think, if I hadn't listened to that show, I would never have this moment in my life. So yeah, and I want to do a whole other podcast, Sal. I want to do like 178 other podcasts, but one of the ones I want to do is like, I want to have people on and tell me about where you're from or where you've been and what's good there. And let's all cross-pollinate all this amazing information like we get to every time. We're with Sal Stefanile, 4for4, head of fun stuff, 2 quarterbacks, pioneer in Superflex, 2 quarterback fantasy football, pioneer in being a wonderful human being to be around, like we got to be around him today. And all of you wonderful people in the chat room in our fantasy football community. You're the inspiration always. Thank you for giving us your time. Always. Private football guys, early bird. Right now, prices